with utilities down in Texas. They're aggressively moving into the service-based model and trying to apply as much customer data, combining that with as much asset data to form a new way to communicate with their customers and a better way to deliver the service.
Absolutely, and not only in Texas, and we're seeing that in the Northeast Corridor as a result of some of the changes in the framework in the Northeast Corridor. We see that definitely, predominantly in Europe. We see that occurring in a lot of places in Europe, in Sweden, Switzerland. We're seeing that happen in Germany very aggressively, across France, UK even. And all over Southeast Asia and China as well, very aggressively moving towards that model. So there is definitely a move in the industry afoot in transitioning to more of a service provider. To that extent, the utilities also have to think past the meter, right?
Right.
So you have to really you think about the technologies you can deploy that gets you past the meter into the premise and allows you to really see the load and the changes in load that are occurring on the premise of the customer.
Room to room, device to device.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And I do like the way that you frame this, that a utility should be doing all of these, deploying intelligent assets, sensors throughout the grid, transmission, distribution, IoT devices to capture this, workforce mobility management. But ultimately, that only gets you so far. And it is once you get to the customer level, all of that modernization will put the utility in a better place to be a good service partner for their customers.
That's actually would be exemplified by electrification of transportation and vehicles, right? So let's take a typical commercial industrial customer who has a reasonable fleet of 10 or more vehicles, right? If you go in today and you look maybe 5 years from now, which I think is the horizon that we're looking at, the transition that they're going to make from the ICE or the internal combustion engine to electric vehicles is going to dramatically increase their load. I mean, dramatically, more than tenfold.
Yes.
Right? So that load shift is actually occurring on the premise. It's not even visible to the meter, right? So you cannot see that. You cannot see where, and it's really load shifting that's going to occur in that side of the meter, right? On the premise of this customer. So if you look at that picture, and for some customers it's even far more bigger than that, right? Because they'll be putting robots, in their premises. They'll be automating. They'll be using a lot more electric motors and integrating all of those components together and autonomizing. So their demand and their load is going to increase by anywhere from 30 to 50 to 100%, maybe even more, right, over the next 5 to 10 years as these. So by not being able to go past that meter, but not being able to go into the premise and being able to look at all of those loads, when they're occurring, how they're occurring, and to what extent those loads are being managed, that demand is going to be hidden from the utility, right? So it's interesting. On one side, you see the demand increasing. On the other side, you see the demand on the grid decreasing, right? So this creates a very interesting dilemma as well. And I think another major driver for the utilities to start looking at and thinking about the end-to-end picture. And again, digital technologies are key here, right? Because what we're seeing is these microcontrollers now move to the edge, move on-premise, right? The customers are beginning to put, these consumer industrial customers are beginning to put their own generation sources onto the premise. They're putting solar, potentially even a gas generator, maybe even a hydrogen generator, right? In the next 5 years, we're going to see significant shifts in hydrogen as well in terms of as an energy supply and storage. They're going to put stationary storage there, and then they're going to run a local optimizer, you know, a multi-vector optimizer that balances that entire load, manages and does peak shaving. So those things are happening, and you know, the utilities are isolated from that today, and then that change is paramount in terms of being able to, for the utilities to be able to monetize, you know, greater value out of the electricity that's being delivered to these customers.
It is, to me, one of the biggest areas that utilities can look to the future and say, this is not just a lifeline, but an opportunity for us to reinvent our business.
Absolutely.
With vehicle electrification.
And I'd say at the foundational, fundamental enabler here is the digital technology, digitalization, and capabilities that are required to do that. Right? If you can't monitor, if you can't collect the data, if you can't monitor, if you can't analyze that, and if you can't drive control, you're not going to be able to monetize the value that's being generated there.
Well, Rob, this has been just a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Chris. Thank you.